Number 10. Rose McGowan. So let's talk about the show Charmed for a second, a solid series that was on air for basically 10 years. The series followed three sisters that discover they are descendants of a long line of good female witches and are destined to fight against the forces of evil. Yes, it was a very fun show, however, just because you play sisters on set does not mean that you're always going to be close in real life. Rose McGowan and Alyssa Milano had a very public altercation that resulted in a little incident on set being shared with the world. Rose claimed that Alyssa threw a fit in front of the crew, yelling, "They don't pay me enough to do this stuff," only she didn't say stuff. She called Alyssa's behavior appalling, claiming she cried every time that the show got renewed for another season because it just meant more time on a toxic set. Alyssa never shared her comments on the situation, confirming what she was being accused of. Number 9. Richard Gere. Richard Gere is one of those actors that doesn't really act. Sometimes people just get hired for films because they have a face for it or the style. For Richard, he did not have enough class and moxie to keep a handle on his role in the film Lords of the Flatbush. He was casted to star line Rocky himself, Sylvester Stallone, and according to Sly, the two didn't get along at all. Their beef was strong and long-lasting throughout the entire production until it finally came to a head one day when Richard was a bit too into one scene and he actually grabbed Sylvester pretty aggressively by the collar. When Sly told him to lay off, he laid in instead. The scene was being filmed on Coney Island, and when the actors took a minute to take a break, they tried to break each other. Sly was eating a hot dog alone in his car, which sounds pretty peaceful, and suddenly Richard stormed in, joined him with half of a chicken dripping in mustard, and despite his warnings about the mustard, seriously, it dripped all over his pants. In true Rocky fashion, he elbowed Richard in the face, threw him out of his car, and the altercation resulted in Richard being fired from the project. Oh no, they had to decide between Richard Gere and Rocky. I wonder how quick that decision was. Number 8. Selma Blair. It's funny that this entry involves Charlie Sheen getting a woman fired when he himself has been fired from so many projects because of, well, several reasons. After being fired from 2.5 Men, Sheen returned to the acting world, headlining his own show called Anger Management. It premiered in 2012 with cast featuring Hellboy alumni Selma Blair playing his colleague and friend with benefits on the show. However, Sheen's terrible behavior continued to haunt him from his 2.5 Men days. Blair was very vocal on her problems with Charlie, especially his messy work ethic. Charlie heard and he was having none of that, so he threatened to quit the show if Blair was going to remain a part of the cast. Sheen got his way and Blair was let go after starring in 54 episodes. The show didn't last long though. Who would have guessed that a messy actor being the lead was a bad idea? It got cancelled in 2014. Next up, 7. Shannen Doherty. Unfortunately for Shannen Doherty, she gained quite the reputation in Hollywood for being fired due to issues with her co-stars. She may or may not be making another appearance on this list. Who knows? Guess you'll have to stick around and find out. For the first entry, we're going to look back to the very popular series teen drama 90210, a series following the lives of the Walsh family as they moved from Minneapolis to Beverly Hills. Doherty played the character Brenda Walsh, with her character eventually befriending several students at Beverly Hills High, including Donna Martin, played by Tori Spelling. The series was a hit after its initial season, however, with increased popularity came massive egos. Doherty and Spelling started clashing on set constantly, adding additional drama to the production team that really just didn't need to be there. Considering Tori's father, Aaron Spelling, was the producer on the show, it's pretty simple to piece together what happened. Doherty claimed that she was officially let go for having a haircut that messed up the continuity of the show, but a wig could have fixed that, so better believe Tori Spelling told her papa to boot her from the series. Number 6. Edward Norton. As we all know, Edward Norton didn't last long as the Incredible Hulk in the MCU, only being in one movie in 2008. By the way, I've read some of the comments, and no, Edward Norton was not the first person to play the Hulk on screen. The honor goes to Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby from the original series, and don't you dare get me started on Eric Bana, looking like he's farting every time he turns into the Hulk. The 2008 film was a success, but not a massive box office goat. The studio were at odds and they wanted to keep using the Hulk and incorporate him into the Avengers, but Edward Norton was becoming increasingly difficult to work with. When he was contacted to keep playing the character, he demanded more money from the studio. However, he was already on thin ice following his time filming The Incredible Hulk. While not some wild on-set meltdown, Norton did make some pretty odd choices. For instance, as part of his contract, he was allowed to rewrite the script as much as he wanted, but it still needed to be approved. So he wrote new scripts over and over again until we got the 2008 Incredible Hulk movie with some of Ed's ideas baked into the final script. Kevin Feige claims that the choice to part ways with Ed was not based on money, but instead on Marvel just wishing to hire an actor that embodies the creative and collaboration side of their talented members. Essentially, he was like, Mark Ruffalo's nicer than you and he doesn't write his scripts, so bye-bye. This ended up being a great decision on both parts though, because Mark Ruffalo is fantastic as Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and Edward went went on to make several high-quality films, including a few collaborations with Wes Anderson. Moonrise Kingdom would not have been the same without Edward Norton as Scoutmaster Ward. Number 5. Anne Hathaway. So a fun fact that I was unaware of until today, Anne Hathaway was almost a secondary lead in one of the most universally loved Seth Rogen movies of all time. Knocked Up from 2007 follows Seth Rogen and Katherine Heigl as they prepare for the arrival of an unplanned baby after a one-night stand. The cast was packed with stellar comedians like Paul Rudd, Jonah Hill, Leslie Mann, so many more, and the cast almost featured an up-and-coming actor at the time, Anne Hathaway. Anne is famous these days for roles in movies like Princess Diary, Interstellar, and Ocean's 8. These days, she's considered to be at the top of the A-list. In 2013, she even took home her first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Now, before this though, she actually agreed to be in Knocked Up because she thought the script was great and that Seth Rogen, is Seth Rogen. You work with him every chance you can. However, she eventually decided not to participate in the film after one issue with the script became cause for concern. The scene in question was one of the final moments in the film, which for those of you who have seen the movie know is pretty graphic. The birthing scene in Knocked Up ended up being a combination of Katherine acting and some close-up clips of her cookie. Anne read that part and decided that her first role in a major comedy movie should maybe be something else. Although it was confirmed that it was not going to be her bits and bobs on display, she has a no birthday suit clause. It worked out for everyone though, because Katherine did a great job despite hating the set apparently, and Anne Hathaway is one of the biggest movie stars to date, so good for her. Number 4. Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper is one of the groundbreaking actors and directors from the 1960s and 70s New Hollywood, eventually finding his niche in the early 90s, playing villains in movies like Speed, Waterworld, and the live-action Mario Brothers movie, where he plays Bowser. Yes, that exists. No, it's not good. So it came as no surprise when he was casted to play Christoph, the all-powerful TV producer controlling Truman Burbank's life in the movie The Truman Show. The cast was incredible and included Hollywood heavyweight Jim Carrey as the titular Truman. Anyone with a brain cell would have been excited to be a part of this film, still considered to be one of his best dramatic performances. However, 2 days into filming his scenes for Christoph, which were only expected to take about 10 days to film, Hopper was unceremoniously let go from the set. Apparently, Dennis had a contract in place with producer Scott Rudin that he would be fired should his work be unsatisfactory. He must have been pretty bad in the role, as the director Peter Weir has been described as extremely reluctant to ever remove an actor from a movie. Reports later surfaced that Hopper was basically half asleep while playing the character, and while Christoph wasn't written to be like a manic man or anything, he did require some effort to be properly pulled off. Ultimately, Ed Harris stepped in to play the role after production had been desperately trying to replace Dennis to avoid having the film be shut down entirely. Thankfully, that never happened, and The Truman Show has gone on to be one of the most depressingly heartfelt Jim Carrey performances ever. Oh, and Ed actually got nominated for an Oscar, so sorry Dennis, looks like it was a good move. Number 3. Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Belgian actor Jean-Claude Van Damme was just on the verge of coming into his own career as the Muscles from Brussels when he landed a job opposite of Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1987's action flick Predator. This sounded like the perfect casting choice. Jean would have worked alongside the likes of Carl Weathers and Jesse Ventura. While this may have turned out cool, the reality was that Jean wasn't casted to play one of the Marines at all. Instead, he was casted to play the titular Predator himself. The special effects artists behind the project called the experience with Jean as a hilarious comedy of errors, in which no party knew exactly what the other was expecting. Apparently, nobody actually told him that the role was basically just a glorified stuntman. They were prepared to direct him to just hop around like a frog, but Jean was obviously confused and upset with that choice. According to him, he had just gotten off the boat and was under the impression that he was going to be showcasing his martial arts skills to the world, but instead he was reduced to a massive, slow-moving alien with dreadlocks. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, Van Damme was furious and dispirited about spending the entire movie cooped up in a clunky and often ridiculous-looking suit, and he was ultimately fired and replaced with Kevin Peter Hall. The idea that he was just on set being like, I can barely move in this thing, it makes me so happy. Number 2. Janet Hubert. Will Smith got his big break in the acting world thanks to the success of the sitcom Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's a show following Will as the titular prince, living with a wealthy family in Bel-Air surrounded by cousins, uncles, and of course Aunt Vivian. In season 1, Aunt Viv was played by a woman named Janet Hubert Witten, but as a lot of people know, she was recasted after an on-set feud with Will Smith went a little bit too far. According to Will, Janet viewed him as an antagonist in her life. She had been in the business for years, and suddenly Will Smith popped into her life, and she had a tinge of jealousy towards him because he got got into town, got a gig. Well, hey, that's what happens when you're good. She was trying to convince the producers to give her character more screen time and allow her to breathe on camera, but they said no because it wasn't the Aunt Viv show. She fought back hard, but it was ultimately decided that she would be asked to sit out the rest of the series and was replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid, who is Aunt Viv. Number 1. Thomas Gibson. Thomas made a name for himself, starring as one of the leads of the series Criminal Minds. He was on the show for a few years, and in that time he made quite a few problems for those unfortunate enough to be staff members of the series. There were a few issues over the years that would have warranted some action, like screaming at producers and writers for not doing a good job. But the incident that got him kicked off of the show for good involved, well, a kick. In 2016, Thomas was swiftly fired from the series after an incident with a writer named Virgil Williams. An internal investigation revealed that Thomas kicked Virgil one day during production of an episode that Gibson was actually directing. And as I said, this isn't the first incident on set that really should have resulted in some kind of punishment, because 3 years earlier, in 2013, he pleaded no contest to no juice related reckless driving after being arrested under suspicion of DUI, and 3 years before that, he allegedly shoved an assistant director, Ian Wolfe, during a late night location scene. That led to the studio ordering Gibson to take 8 hours of anger management. According to most people on the set, Thomas was a wild card. Some days he was friendly and accommodating, and the next he went ballistic.
From Britney Spears to Nicki Minaj, here are the worst celebrity meltdowns in history. First off, Miss Britney Spears. On February 16, 2007, the Gimme More singer infamously shaved her head. Days later, she shocked the world by furiously attacking a paparazzo's car with an umbrella. The following July, the pop star offered up a bizarre explanation for her violent behavior. I was preparing my character for a role in a movie where the husband never plays his part, so they switch places accidentally, she wrote on her website. I take all my roles very seriously and got a little carried away. Unfortunately, I didn't get the part. But in her 2023 memoir, her opinion on the incident changed. She says, I'd been eyeballed so much growing up, I'd been looked up and down, I had people telling me what they thought of my body since I was a teenager. Shaving my head and acting out were ways of pushing back, Spears adds in the book. After Britney was put in a court-ordered conservatorship in 2008, granting her father and a lawyer control over all her financial and personal affairs, she says she was forbidden from keeping the new shaved look. Under the conservatorship, I was made to understand that those days were now over, she writes. I had to grow my hair out and get back into shape. I had to go to bed early and take whatever medication they told me to take. Our next celebrity meltdown involves Nothing Compares to You singer Sinead O'Connor. Sinead was performing on SNL when a brief moment destroyed her entire career. On October 3rd, 1992, O'Connor appeared on SNL to promote her new album, Am I Not Your Girl? For the second song of the evening, O'Connor had chosen to perform an a cappella version of Bob Marley's song War. Throughout the performance, she stared intently into the camera, and as she sang the final line, we have confidence in the victory of good over evil, O'Connor held a photograph of the Pope directly in front of the camera, ripped it up, saying, fight the real enemy, before throwing the pieces to the floor. The SNL producers were not aware of O'Connor's plan. During the dress rehearsal, she had held up a picture of a child. Everybody at SNL apparently froze after the live performance, unsure how to react, and that the music producer Liz Welch went from jubilation to tears. The executive producer Lorne Michaels said the air went out of the studio and that he ordered that the applause sign should not be used. The audience remained silent and O'Connor returned to her dressing room where somebody found her talking to herself, quote, doing something between poetry and chanting. Our next celebrity meltdown involves Nicki Minaj and Mariah Carey. On an episode of American Idol, the former show judges got into a curse word-filled fight. Minaj criticized Carey for being too harsh on a contestant, which the Vision of Love singer responded by saying, I'm sorry, it's just that that's what I do, Nicki. The Anaconda rapper immediately fired back. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry I can't help her, she said, tossing her seat behind her. Maybe I should just get off the effing panel. Let me get off the panel. After leaving the room, Nicki was overheard shouting, shut the F up. Finish the show, I'm done. But that's not the only on-air meltdown Nicki Minaj has had. when accepting her VMA award for Best Music Video, Nicki made a dig at fellow performer Miley Cyrus. While thanking her pastor and other fans, Nicki said, "Back to this B-word who had a lot to say about me the other day in the press. Miley, what's good?" Speaking of on-air meltdowns, Hugh Grant had some rude things to say to Ellen while on her talk show. After she complimented her guest, calling him fantastic, smart, and all those things, Grant responded back by saying, "I wish I thought that about you." He also had some rude things to say about Julia Roberts while on the Oprah show. Very big mouth. Literally, physically, she has a very big mouth. When I was kissing her, I was aware of a faint echo. Again, they would try to get Grant back on track during the interview, mentioning that Julia Roberts was a really good person, in which Grant responded by saying, "I wouldn't go that far." Hugh Grant would go on to admit that this current relationship with Roberts is not on the best of terms because of past comments. "I've probably made too many jokes about the size of her mouth. She might hate me by now." Michael Jackson seemed to have a meltdown after his infamous baby dangling incident. If you don't know what I'm talking about, here is the story. In 2002, Michael Jackson visited Berlin to accept an award for his philanthropic work on behalf of children, a Lifetime Bambi Entertainment Award. During his stay, the pop star dangled his 9-month-old son, nicknamed Blanket because his face was covered with a towel, over the balcony of the hotel he was staying in. It seemed that what the king of pop was trying to do was show his baby to the fans that had gathered outside his hotel, but the public's response was obviously completely opposite from what Jackson had expected. As soon as photos and videos of the incident were released to the public, the media started criticizing Michael's parenting skills and reckless behavior. Ringo Starr, a former member of the Beatles, got in a serious altercation with interviewer Sherry Hewson. During a live event, she said, "He just sat down, said, 'Okay then girls, what are we doing here? Shall we just get Paul McCartney out of the way?'" This was live, by the way. Anyway, he carries on. "Let's get Paul McCartney out the way." "You want me to talk about Paul McCartney?" I said. "Well, no, you're here." And he said, "No, you don't. You want to talk about Paul McCartney." She continued, "He was so angry. It was just so weird. I thought, why? Why? It was just a really weird thing." And then he said to the audience, "Can I tell you all, if anyone wants an autograph, cannot have one, because I don't do things like that." At the end of it, one of the producers came up with one of her little children who was only 4 years old and said that she knew he didn't do autographs, but told him that her daughter was only 4 and she really loves the Beatles. He just stared and said, "Really?" And then he said, "Did you not hear what I just said? I don't sign autographs." Yikes. David Letterman, former host of the David Letterman Show, has made some really weird on-screen moments while interviewing celebrities, and some of these stories are really hard to believe. When he was interviewing Madonna, he stopped the interview and asked her, "Why don't you go and kiss the guy in the audience?" Shocked, she said, "Why are you so obsessed with my love life?" He responded by saying, "Go kiss the guy in the audience. It would knock him out." She responded, "I can't. I've never succumbed to peer pressure." Interviewing Jennifer Lopez, he made the cameraman zoom into a close-up of her chest while saying, "That's pretty good. That's pretty darn good." Ew. David Letterman seems quite rude, but perhaps the rudest interview story has to go to Jesse Eisenberg. While promoting his new movie Now You See Me, the actor seemed to have a meltdown while in an interview, being extremely rude to the interviewer. Out of nowhere, Jesse brought up the often maligned comedian Carrot Top. Before long, it became clear that Eisenberg only brought up Carrot Top so he could mock the interviewer, whose name is Puga, her abilities as an interviewer. "Do you know the comedian Carrot Top? Well, you're like the Carrot Top of interviewers." "Yeah, it's a good thing. Don't cry now. Cry after the interview is over, because otherwise I'll look like I'm responsible for it." Yikes. After this back and forth conversation, Eisenberg half-heartedly performed a magic trick. Puga then asked Eisenberg if he could say her name to the camera. In response, Eisenberg asked Puga to explain what his motivation for saying her name was, like he was performing an acting exercise. When Puga asked Eisenberg to say her name like he was trying to find her in a crowded place, he quietly said her name. Puga then remarked that she would never be able to hear him in a club, and his explanation for why he was being quiet seemed very harsh. He said, "The thing is, I actually didn't want to find you. I actually was hoping to stay alone." After the interview was done, the interviewer said she went behind the curtain and cried. Shia LaBeouf, former Disney star known for his troubled past, turned heads when he wore a paper bag saying, "I am not famous anymore," to a red carpet premiere for his new movie. Just hours before the premiere, LaBeouf found himself sat with a panel in front of a room full of journalists as well as his co-stars. When asked about his decision to star in a movie with so many love scenes, he bent low over the microphone and replied, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much." He then got up, pushed the mic away, and stormed out of the conference, leaving the audience and his fellow panelists mystified. What does that even mean? Our final celebrity meltdown involves Miss Ariana Grande. In 2015, Ariana went with friends to a donut shop to grab a sweet treat. Everything was looking good until the employee at the donut shop supposedly turned around behind the counter, and while he wasn't looking, Ariana licked some of the donuts still for sale while saying, "I hate America," and later calling the donuts disgusting. The security footage of the incident went mega viral online, and Ariana quickly went to Twitter to apologize, saying, "Seeing a video of yourself behaving poorly that you have no idea was taken is such a rude awakening that you don't know what to do. I was so disgusted with myself." She said, "I'm not here to make any excuses or to justify my behavior because I can't. I'm just here to apologize."
Number 10, Mike Tyson. So I had trouble landing on just one interview to mention when it comes to this man. He is someone who seems to just bounce back after every single heinous thing he's done. So we're gonna run through a few of them. The first time Mike really hurt his career was in the 80s, and it wasn't even something he said. He was doing an interview with his then girlfriend Robin Gibbs. When the topic of Mike's behavior came up, she said herself that Mike had an extremely volatile temper. Recent reports had also surfaced of Mike getting loud and physical with Robin, something she seemingly confirmed, while Mike just stared at the interviewer the entire time, giving him an evil look. Now, that was one of the first little notches on his belt. That wasn't really a meltdown. As the years went by, more and more controversies came to light, and during a press tour for his latest bout in the early 2000s, he lashed out at a fan in the crowd, hurling a slew of insults and calling them the British word for cancer sticks. It starts with an F and it rhymes with maggot. The clip became viral overnight and placed his career in jeopardy, but he finally drove that nail into the coffin on CP24's Breakfast Television in 2014. After somehow maintaining enough relevance to get a one-man show, Mike was sitting down with host Nathan Downer to promote when the interview took a hard left and went from "So, what's the show about?" to "So, should you even be allowed on stage, you monster?" That's not what he actually said, but apparently that's what Mike Tyson heard, because he stopped answering questions and would instead hurl sarcastic insults. The F word is once again his favorite and just throws it at him. I don't know if you've noticed, but Mike hasn't been on the news much since then, and probably for a good reason. Number 9, Paula Abdul. Q13 Fox News. In 2012, famous judge and British bad boy Simon Cowell decided to fire his fellow X Factor judge after she went on Fox News and made herself sound like a little bit of a fool. During an interview with Q13, things started out a little rocky thanks to some audio issues causing Paula to hear a station in Texas instead of their own. When they eventually got everything up and running, Paula was just as confusing as she was with the original issues. The interviewers were trying to ask her about her visit to Seattle, where Simon claims that the worst singers that he has ever encountered dwell. Instead of defending the city, Paula doubled down and agreed with Simon. It's not the statement though that landed her in the hot seat, it was actually just the way that she was speaking. Paula had always been a little bit animated in her life, using arms a lot when speaking to people, but she was particularly slurry and seemed like she was under the influence of something. This was just one of several interviews where Paula is noticeably woozy. Simon Cowell has actually claimed the only reason she was invited to host on the X Factor in the first place was to see if she would bring in the American Idol viewers, and when that didn't pan out, he realized the right move to make was to let her go because she's not great on television. Of course, Paula was mad about this and confronted Simon several times, only making that meltdown bigger and bigger. Number 8, Robert Downey Jr. Being a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe means a ton of interviews. Now, Robert had the fortune of playing Iron Man for 10 years, being featured in 11 movies. While doing press for his second round with the Avengers in 2015, he had the misfortune of speaking with a legendarily terrible interviewer, Krishnan Guru Murphy, on Channel 4. Now, I've talked about this guy in other videos for making Quentin Tarantino walk out of an interview, and he is making a return for something pretty similar. The interview is uncomfortable from the very beginning. Christian stumbles through his questions as quickly as he can, with Robert doing his best just to keep things smooth. Instead of asking questions about the movie though, Christian decided to probe Robert about his life in prison and with substance control issues. Now, at first, he's okay and answers the questions, but then Christian brings up his dad and asks if he feels that he escaped his dark past. Robert is visibly anxious and begins breathing pretty heavy to keep himself calm. He asks what they were doing there, and then the team said goodbye. He stood up and walked out of the room, and he said that Christian seemed nice, but things were getting just a little bit too Diane Sawyer for his taste. This was one of the most uncomfortable interview moments in Robert's career, and it's not even close to the worst one for Christian. Number 7, Sophia Vergara. Fans of the show Modern Family will recognize Sophia as Gloria, aka Manny's mom, who is just absolutely hilarious and heartwarming at the same time, even outside of Modern Family. Now, while speaking with Ellen in 2017 about her career and some new projects coming up, Ellen decided to play a game called English Word of the Day. Claiming to be learning Spanish with one word a day, she wished to teach Sophia one as well. Before the segment, Sophia is roasting Ellen for her dislike of cotton, but when Ellen asks if she wants to learn the English word with her, Sophia scoffs and is visibly annoyed, claiming that she speaks English very well. Ellen gives her the word flabbergasted and asks her to define what it means. Not only does she pronounce it correctly the first time, but she knew exactly what it meant. Ellen follows it up with discombobulated, which left Sophia confused and thinking pretty hard. Now, she butchered the word, and while she seemed to be taking things in stride, it turns out Sophia was so frustrated with participating in this game, as she is a bit self-conscious when it comes to her accent. A lot of people consider the segment to be a little bit racist and more cringe-inducing than fun. I've seen the clip. That's accurate. Number 6, Joaquin Phoenix. We understand a dedication to your craft, and Joaquin Phoenix is just a prime example. This dude's acting career has been going steady since he first appeared in the 1989 comedy Parenthood when he was in his teens. Now, while he is seen as one of the greatest actors in recent history, his reputation on set was a little tarnished thanks to a freak out while filming the 2018 solo flick Joker. He appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote the shoot when Jimmy plays a behind-the-scenes clip of Joaquin getting loud and angry at a man named Larry, and the constant whispering behind the cameras before dropping a few F-bombs and storming off this set. When the cameras came back to the studio, Joaquin was frozen in shock and clearly not expecting that clip to ever see the light of day. He is not having a good time. He explained that Larry was a cinematographer who teased Joaquin off set earlier in the day, calling him a diva and referring to him as Cher. In fact, if you're watching the clip and during the outbursts, you can actually hear him say, "You want to call me Cher? How is that an insult?" He then explained that there is a lot of pressure on set, especially in a closed space, like the apartment from the scene that they were filming. He apologized to the audience for having to see him behave like that, which, was met with applause. Because at the end of the day, he's a performer and no harm came from the outburst or the meltdown, and honestly, if Larry's cool with it, so are we. Number 5, Nicolas Cage. The most unhinged man in Hollywood history. One of the few people who somehow managed to star in billions of movies, but has barely seen or kept a cent of that money. During a press junket in 1990, Nick went on a talk show called Wogan to discuss his latest project, Wild at Heart. When the host Terry Wogan announced Nick Cage, he entered with karate kicks, a front flip, somersault. He threw wads of cash at the audience because, hey, he's Nick Cage, why not? And when he finally sat down, moments before the interview actually began, he asked if he could take his jacket off. He proceeds to take his jacket off and the shirt underneath of it, because if people thought Nick Cage was all together, they were proven wrong during this interview. Despite the content being relatively tamed, the entire time you can just see sweat glistening off of Nick's chest, because guess what? Wearing a leather jacket on your bare chest is beyond uncomfortable, especially when there are lights aimed at you. Now sure, it might look cool until you take it off and you just have a heat rash. Nick's always been unhinged, but this meltdown during this interview was truly unique. His behavior in the 90s was apparent and well documented thanks to him literally being in like 2 movies a year. Number 4, Christian Bale. Christian is a very versatile actor, physically physically and of course skill-wise, he's able to shrink and grow his physique seemingly at will. He's played everything from a skinny substance addict to Batman in 2008. Christian starred in the third film of the Terminator franchise, Terminator Salvation, and while he was filming a scene, director of photography Shane Hubert apparently just moved into Christian's eyesight, and this caused Christian to snap out of character and into defense mode. The now infamous audio clip of Christian screaming at Shane to make matters worse, anyone trying to calm Christian down were met with an equally swift verbal lashing. While the cinematographer was just checking a light to make sure that it was in the right place, you know, like doing his job, Bale made it his mission to share his intense feelings with the entire crew. When the audio leaked, Bale apologized for his actions and told the world to praise the crew for their work. Now, while the movie turned out okay visually speaking, the project as a whole is remembered as a terrible Terminator movie, and he gets pretty uncomfortable when he talks about it on stage. Number 3, Paris Hilton. Paris is the originator of the phrase famous for being famous, because this woman made headlines many times over the years for a little bit of everything. In 2011, Paris appeared on ABC to discuss her career, her personal life, and the recent situations she had been dealing with involving stalkers. During the interview, she revealed a few things about her life that had previously been speculated, like the fact that she used a higher-pitched baby voice on the show Simple Life, but had a much deeper and serious tone in real life. But the conversation eventually ventures into uncharted waters. The interviewer asked Paris if she felt that her former friend and protege, Kim Kardashian, had overshadowed her in the eyes of the media. Paris says nothing, looks to her publicist, and goes to stand up. They almost wrapped the interview entirely, but eventually things simmered down and they were able to clear up the air. However, the moment stuck with fans of Hilton immediately and begged the question, why is she so uncomfortable talking about this? And it's because it's true. Well, it turns out the world answered the question for her, because Kim Kardashian's show, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, made it big, and Paris Hilton's show was cancelled after one season. So, there you go. Number 2, Tom Cruise. Matt Lauer is not just a terrible person who turned out to be a creepy creepo. He was once a popular talk show host in the early 2000s. During an interview with Tom Cruise in 2005, the topic of his scientific beliefs came up that quickly sent Tom into a rant about psychiatry, and somehow the topic got into Ritalin and pseudosciences. I don't know, Tom yelled at Matt about knowing more than him about psychiatry, like he had some inside information that he was secretly a therapist, who knows. The interview came at the height of Tom's pretty public descent into chaotic badness, becoming very famous for his outlandish beliefs and his wish to push them onto other people. The highlight of the interview came when Cruz was asked about his previous criticisms of Brooke Shields taking anti-sad time pills, to which he responded by calling her a glib. I looked up the definition of that word, and it means fluent and voluble, but insincere and shallow. What? This was only one of the several interviews from 2005 that I wanted to discuss today, especially with Tom Cruise. Good lord, that was a rough year for him. When he was with Katie Holmes, he was a nutcase. Just ask Oprah. I mean, ever since the mid-2000s, his career has mainly been Mission Impossible, with only a few small roles to fill the gaps here and there, not the Hollywood superstar that he was aiming to be. And at number 1, my favorite entry, Bobcat Goldthwait. Allow me to start the entry by doing an impression of Bobcat. Thank you. Bobcat may not be much of an actor these days, but in the 80s and 90s, this man was dominating the film and comedy scene. His zany brand of over-the-top, high-energy performance was so well received by any and all who saw him. I can still hear his voice echoing in my head whenever I think of Police Academy. In 1994, comedian Arsenio Hall invited his longtime buddy Bobcat onto his talk show, which unfortunately was in its final days on the air. When he heard the cancellation, Bobcat decided to send a message to the big brains that made the decision, because he spray painted the word Paramount on the wall behind him, throws furniture around, breaks TV screens, all the while Arsenio is just sitting back and laughing. When they returned from commercial, the set was in ruins, and despite that, Arsenio joked that he was like, the worst part is I have to pretend like I'm mad at him. Joke's on him, that wasn't the only talk show meltdown he partook in. A few years after this, Bobcat set a chair on fire on the Jay Leno show for no reason, just for fun. Like he was standing there just going, fire. He was fined over $3,000 and made to replace the chair. Oh, and in case you haven't noticed, he hasn't been asked to be on any talk shows recently.